All right, welcome everyone. We appreciate you being here for the 2022 executive budget presentation. Just to let our folks know, we are live streaming this. We'll have this up on the city's website. In addition, after today's presentation, on the city's website, jamestowny.gov/budget, you'll be able to review the full executive budget, the executive budget summary, as well as this presentation in whole. So we're very excited today to have you all here and to talk about the things that we're looking for in 2022. When we started off, and I did my first executive budget last year, it was a much different time. We were in the middle of COVID. We had so many things going on, but this year was really unique because of a lot of factors. But the one thing I do want to, first off, is just to thank all of our department heads for the work that they did putting this budget together. It was no small feat this year as we attempted to standardize all of the projects and, for the first time in many years, fund a lot of capital projects. I especially want to thank members of our finance team that are really the meat and potatoes, if you will, of putting this budget together. Ryan Thompson, our comptroller, Jennifer Williams, our city clerk / treasurer. I always love the slash, right? Get to be both. As well as my executive assistant, Zach Altschuler, and my secretary, Michaela Cleveland. We all worked very hard over the past several months to try to put together a budget that reflects the city and where we want the city to go in 2022. Zach, if you'd go to the next slide. I want to just point out first and foremost, we're in a much different place than we were last year. We're in a much stronger fiscal position, believe it or not. COVID has not only shown us the issues that we are experiencing, but also the strengths that we have as a city. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to rage on. We just have some uncertainty on where that's going to go and how it's going to go. But what we do know, and one of the things that we've seen delivered from our senators, Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, as well as all the folks up in DC, the American Rescue Plan recovery funds. Really a one-shot in the arm for the city and every municipality in this country. As you all know, the city has received over $28 million in American Rescue Plan funds, and of that, around $10 million is just in lost revenue. Why is that important? Over the next several years, as we draw down that lost revenue component, we will now be able to fund capital projects, general services, additional positions, and all kinds of things that for decades we've had to hold off on. For decades, we've had to make those tough decisions to say, let's go another year to let that tractor go, to keep going. Let's go another year to see if we're going to have enough funds to hire someone else. That is what we've experienced in the last several years, and we finally get an opportunity to address some of those things with this American Rescue Plan funds. So as we put this together, you'll notice a couple things. We've created a budget that looks as if it were a regular budget year. So you will notice that certain things are either filled out or not filled out in the budget. Because we wanted to accurately reflect the position of the city if we didn't have any rescue plan funds. However, we know as we go through this budget, and I'll point out a few items, that anything that we use in terms of a fund balance or other areas will be offset by some of the lost revenue we have. We've also, for the first time in a while, created a whole capital stack. We've put together in this budget every capital program that our department heads have asked for over the years and for this year, so that if there is room or if council chooses to fund one project over the other, you can check out and look at all of the capital projects that are being requested by our departments. Zach, next page, please. Just a few items to look forward in this budget. Number one, we've seen a strong growth in property values after decades of stagnation. Number two, this budget is actually looking to invest in a modern, diverse workforce, which we'll talk about. Number three, we are hiring new city employees at no additional cost to the taxpayer. Number four, there is no tax rate increase proposed under this budget. And number five, we are using the American Rescue Plan funds to make a massive investment in the city, to make it more efficient, to raise the quality of life for our residents, and invest in much needed city projects. So before we go into some of the big items here, I want to just talk briefly about some of the revenues and expenditures and other things you'll see in our budget summary. First and foremost, projected revenues. As you'll notice, not too far off from most years, 41% of our total budget comes from real property tax, followed by sales tax this year, which we have increased quite a significant amount. We do have another sales tax slide we'll talk about. But I do want to note that most of the other local revenues are still down from the last several years, right? So we had to plan those accordingly. When we would normally expect other local revenues to be up, they have stayed stagnant or at the same level. So they continue to remain there. But we have appropriated additional money for sales tax. With real property tax, we are seeing an increase in that as pilot payments have come off and have turned into full tax base. And you will notice that there is a use of fund balance. Again, as a reminder, this will be offset by the lost revenue funds we receive from the American Rescue Plan Act. I do want to note that this does include in the state aid category a $1 million grant from the state of New York. However, it's contingent on the state's budgeting process that usually happens around April of each year. And we have been informed by the state that if we do receive this funding, it will most likely be our last year for that aid. So I just wanted to point that out. We have to start looking at other things. If we go to the next slide, to talk a little bit about expenditures. Top categories of expenditures, first and foremost, continue to be our police and health insurance fund. As a reminder, we maintain health insurance in almost all of our units for our employees and their spouses for life. That continues to be a legacy cost. However, I am pleased to note that we do have an incredible healthcare committee made up of retirees and active members that have been working to try to lower those healthcare costs. Any of those savings have not been budgeted into this. Just want to be clear about that. All right. Public works still is a pretty large section, about 16%, followed by fire and other employee benefits. We'll note here you'll see a decrease in the health insurance, a small change in expenditures. We had renegotiated the police and fire contracts. They now have brought up their percentage that they contribute to be more in line with other units. So you will notice that there is a slight change in some of the health insurance line for expenditures. Next slide. As noted from the Comptroller's Office for New York State, the retirement contribution rates were going to be going down. We did receive those rates. We are seeing a decrease in some of the areas. However, it's not always the largest. In our regular employee system, we have about a 29% decrease in rates. However, our police and fire only equates to about a 6% decrease. Even though these numbers are down for 2022, payroll costs are still going up. So it does equal themselves out. But it does help. We like that. We like when they lower some of those rates, for sure. Next slide. And just a brief note, we always ask about our constitutional debt limit. We are currently at 38.74% of our constitutional debt limit. So priorities for the 2022 budget this year. We kind of broke them down into about 4 different categories. Number 1 being sustainable growth for the city. Number 2, enhancements to technology and cybersecurity. Number 3, planning for a modern and diverse workforce for our city. And number 4, building city capacity with American Rescue Plan funds. So we're going to talk about each of these 4 categories and budget priorities that you guys will see this year. Next slide. The first item we wanted to just touch base on is sustainable growth. And this is really tremendous. When our finance team came together and showed us where our property values are, full property valuation, it has been incredible to watch and see the growth that we are experiencing in terms of property values here in the city. In 2018, we experienced a year-over-year growth at about 0.2%. In 2019, we experienced a 0.6% year-over-year growth. When we took over in 2020 with a new administration and some new folks all over the place, we started to see a 1.9% growth. And in 2021, a 2.8% growth. And for 2022, we're estimating a 4% growth in property valuation. This is phenomenal, truly, to see that. And it correlates with properties being sold, properties being renovated, people buying, selling. It's the correlation that we're seeing, and it is boding well for the city, its tax base, and the future. Next slide. Also on the rise, we're seeing some historical sales tax levels. We've really had a record year. We're projecting for 2021 a 13.5% year-over-year sales tax change. And for the executive budget, we have projected and brought in a 3% sales tax increase. I do want to make a note here about sales tax because this is very, very important for the public, for the media, and for our council. None of our estimations in sales tax includes anything related to cannabis sales. As you know, the city has not yet opted out for the use of cannabis for the sale or consumption. However, we are estimating conservatively that once those sales do begin and licenses are issued here in the city, we can expect anywhere from $700,000 to $1 million in additional revenue just from cannabis sales alone. We've worked with some of our other counterparts in similar cities, such as Ithaca, to try to project some of those numbers. But I want to point out that this will be a significant increase in sales tax for the city. Next slide, please. Just to point out, constitutional tax limit. We are currently at 93.3% of our taxing power. Pretty good for where we're at right now in the budget for 2022. Next slide. So let's get into some of the other categories we want to talk about. So enhancing technology and cybersecurity operations. One of the things that often keeps me up at night, besides hearing about fires and other things in the city, is really our cybersecurity. As cities continue to use and modernize technology, we're seeing more and more break-ins to security, to networks, and it is requiring that cities invest more in cybersecurity. So we are proposing a couple different changes this year and investments into our technology infrastructure. You may remember last year our finance team did an incredible job at putting tax payments online for the first time ever. You could pay with an e-check, you could pay with a credit card. That will continue on into this year, and we'll be moving to incorporate more online payments for licenses, permits, and other things within the city. We implemented this year a program called GovPilot that has started to aggregate data and allow us to report on where things or what things are happening in the city. For example, the number of complaints we get about potholes or lights that are out. We can start to use that to target areas that need support from our city departments in advance of us having to plan for it. In addition, it's allowing us to start to move our permit process, our license process, and other things online, which we're very excited about. We're funding through this budget a cyber intrusion detection system for the city, as well as multi-factor authentication for all of our users to provide an extra level of security. We're also proposing an additional full-time systems analyst role within our IT department. And you may recall this year the council had approved and we will continue to implement a fire software system that moves our fire department from paper and carbon copy forms to fully online and tablets. This is also integrated with the county's E911 system, which allows data to be delivered directly to our fire trucks about locations of fire hydrants and accidents without having them to call back into dispatch or to look up on paper forms where things are at. Next slide. We've also talked about building a modern and diverse workforce. This budget includes certain things for succession planning that we want to point out. First and foremost, it includes an assistant director of public works. It also includes an additional building maintenance mechanic. We've got a pretty old building here in the city. For any of you that have been in it, it's been around for quite some time and has a lot of different pipes. However, there is only one person in this building that knows how to use all the pipes. And so we want to make sure that we are able to plan for additional support and maintenance for our city facilities, as well as start to plan and look towards public works. With the number of projects, capital projects we're looking to expand on, having an assistant public works director to help coordinate those things is really going to be instrumental down the line. Next slide. We're also proposing the hiring of an ombudsman and director of HR, diversity, and inclusion. This is a position that has been gone for quite a long time in the city. As we look at our workforce and as we hear and listen to the community, we've heard that the community wants, and we believe, that we need to focus on creating a workforce that looks at diversity, inclusion, equity, and accessibility in mind. We want to be able to use this person to be our Chief Human Rights Coordinator, our Labor Relations Specialist, and most importantly, this position will focus on employee development and growth. Much of that now is done through our mid-level managers, and they're stretched thin with grant writing, they're stretched thin with responding to calls. All of those things are things we need, and if we want to have a modern workforce in the city, we need to have a position that helps us do just that. Next slide. So now we've come to the part where we want to talk a little bit about some of the capital projects, and I'm proud to highlight a few of the items from the different parts of our budget and different departments. But I want to point out that this is really a record investment in capital projects this year. Over $3 million has been allocated just to these projects alone. Again, these are all from our lost revenue category from the American Rescue Plan funds. That still leaves well over $23 million to spend on other city priorities outside of this funding. It includes capital projects from every single department. And to give you an example of how massive this is, on an average year, we have about 10 capital projects that we fund out of the budget. And that doesn't include any funding for CHIPS, for streets, for employment, those types of things. This year, we funded 41 capital projects. Just to give you a little bit of the scale here for it. Next slide. So let's talk about some of the fun things out of this budget. First and foremost, parks. Under the budget, we have funded a dog park at Bergman Park, both for small and large breed dogs with an agility course, shade, and water. We've also funded a disc golf course at Allen Park, a new playground at Nordstrom Park, improvements to Dietrich Park, AED devices at every city park, and 3 new laborers in our parks department to help maintain and absorb new projects. I've been very clear, with over 500 acres of parkland in the city, this is really a jewel to have. Anyone that moves to the city sees our parkland, sees our amenities, and thinks, wow, this is a great opportunity, a great place to live. And here is our chance to improve on those amenities and to make them even better. The potential to extend the Riverwalk, the potential to continue working on the skate park and others will come from different components, different funding items, but these are the ones we're at least budgeting for this year. Next slide, please. Other highlights. We are bringing back a summer recreation program, although in a smaller form. There's funding in the budget for festivals, concerts, and events that has been brought back this year. And we're proud to announce recreation sports leagues. You may remember the baseball and the softball, and in consultation with our parks manager, we have added kickball this year, which is something that we've gotten a huge request for. I will say that I do want to challenge all of our employees and our council members to join the inaugural kickball league. We'll see them on the court. We're excited. Just a reminder, it's not dodgeball, right? And just one note here for parks. Zach, next slide. On the radar, but not budgeted for, just a heads up. We are still looking at Willard Street Park, which is also on Tower Street. Complete potential revaluation of that park, as well as looking at how can we best use that area, as well as city splash pads. One of the things that we learned from our listening sessions is that instead of doing one large splash pad, we should consider multiple smaller ones. So we're now in kind of the investigation phase there to see what can look like. All right, again, not on the budget this year, but on the radar and could be used with some other federal funding. Next slide. Highlight for Public Works. I will tell you that our comptroller, Ryan, loves talking about this first item, the salt brining de-icing system, mostly because by moving to this, it will result in a 10% savings every year on our salt budget. That saves the city taxpayers $50 grand a year. So using some of this funding to help us with long-term savings is a really important component of our budget. In addition, we budgeted to replace 4 dump and plow trucks and other high priority vehicle replacements, many which are on their last leg and need to be supported. Public Works is not always the sexiest to talk about, but I'm glad you guys enjoyed the salt brining de-icing system. Next one. Highlights for the police department. New police car has been funded through the budget. This is the first budgeted police car in over a decade. Right? Most of our police cars come from other funds, other sources, and grants. This is the first year in over a decade we've now budgeted for a new police car. We've also budgeted for new portable radios. We're continuing to maintain our community resource officer. And you may know this year that we've added again, because it was removed last year, a school resource officer. So that has now been put back into the budget. Next slide. Some highlights for our fire department. Firehouse improvements and renovations, including the addition of a truck room floor renovation, backup generators, new overhead doors, and other necessary structural and cosmetic renovations. And I do want to point out a request we received is a citywide Knox box system. Many of you may or may not know that for our fire department to enter our commercial buildings, we need a key. And we have, in some cases, lots of keys, but not all current keys to get into commercial buildings. Modern cities have installed what's called a Knox box system to allow us to have current keys to the building that's only accessible to our fire department in the event of an emergency or a fire. So we have funded that system as well. Next slide. Other capital projects just to highlight for the public, the media, and our council. The creation of a bill pay kiosk at the clerk's office to pay your necessary bills. We are funding a citywide feral cat trap, neuter, vaccinate, and return program. I can't tell you the number of phone calls that I have received both as mayor and when I was campaigning, about our feral cats here in the city of Jamestown. We are excited to be able to partner with other animal organizations to be able to create a feral cat program that will allow us to use volunteers to trap, neuter, vaccinate, and return to reduce the feral cat program, reduce feral cats here in the city of Jamestown. And coming back from a very long hiatus, the Human Rights Commission has received funding for outreach and training, as well as funding for a cultural festival here in the city of Jamestown. Next slide. So we wanted to just show you a couple of the highlights for this year's budget. We're very excited to have all of you take a deep dive, as well as the council members, to work with our council this year to pass a budget that really funds capital programs in a tremendous way. Again, over $3 million worth of capital programs. This is a great year for the city of Jamestown, and if we continue our current growth trajectory, we see nothing but good things for us in the future. I want to thank you all for joining us today on the presentation. As a reminder, we do encourage you to stay involved. You can read and view the budget at jamestownny.gov/budget, as well as from the various media that will be reporting on it going forward. At this time, we'll take any questions from the media.
The feral cat program, Mayor, I've heard a lot about that. How would that work, and how would the city manage it with those volunteers?
Yeah, so you'd asked about the feral cat program. Some of our council members have been working with organizations such as the Chautauqua Humane Society about the potential for a program. We've connected with some experts in Erie County and other counties that have worked on other programs to train volunteers to help trap feral cats in the neighborhood, be able to go to a centralized site in which a vet would be able to vaccinate and neuter the animal, and then be able to release them back into the population. So we're going to be working with our partners in the different animal shelters in order to make that happen. And we'll hopefully be able to combine that with some community funding and some grant funding in order to have a pretty successful program to reduce the feral cat problem in the city. Yes? Any questions?
Altogether, how many new employees are in this budget?
It's a great question. We have planned for, I'm going to go to Ryan and Jen on this one, 3 new laborers, a new IT, so that's 4. What else are we missing here?
We have 7 total. 7. Assistant Public Works Director, the Ombudsman, and then the maintenance mechanic position.
Are the laborer positions, because of the increase in projects, are those temporary or are they permanent?
Well, they're currently being funded, I believe, through the American Rescue Plan funds, correct, Ryan?
Yeah.
They're being funded through the American Rescue Plan funds, so we will continue on. Now, we would love to make them permanent as people start to retire. We'll talk about attrition and whether that happens, but we can confirm that we'll keep them at least for the 4 years of the Rescue Plan Fund program.
As for the human rights position in equity, can you kind of describe to us what it was like to build that and what some of the duties would be?
So it's not the Ombudsman and Director of Human Resources, Diversity and Inclusion is actually a position that has been in the city code for quite some time. It was a position that was really instrumental in intergovernmental affairs in the city to help deal with issues that constituents or businesses had, but also to help with employee relations. As of right now, our Corporation Counsel's Office handles all HR matters. And what we have found is that if we want to build a modern and diverse workforce that really focuses on training our employees in diversity, equity, inclusion, as well as helps to manage what we have from a labor perspective, that we need another person to actually help with that process. So what we're proposing is the ability to bring that position back with a slightly changed focus to really help the city grow as a workforce and to provide some diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in what we do.
So those two roles, the ombudsman and the, HR expanded role, would be one person?
One person, yep. The actual code provides for ombudsman / director of human resources. That's the official title.
And then the ombudsman, I'm not saying it right, I'll get it for tomorrow, but that would be if somebody, say, broke a tire on a pothole or something like that, and they wanted the city to try to reimburse them. Is that correct thinking on that channel? Or-
An ombudsman can provide a couple different things. They're meant to help not only residents and constituents, but also businesses connect with city government to make sure that the departments are cooperating with each other. And in that same vein, also help with labor support, labor relations, which is really important.
Eddie, with the increase in the property tax levy and such, is there basically a flat tax rate? How is that washing out in this budget?
The tax rate stays exactly the same as it was last year. There is no change because of increases in sales tax, as well as the ability for us to receive some of the lost revenue category from the rescue plan funds, as well as the increases you mentioned in the tax levy. We're able to keep it flat this year.
Are you using any fund balance?
Yes, fund balance has been scheduled to be used. As I noted at the beginning, there is an offset with lost revenue from the American Rescue Plan funds.
I just wanted to make sure. Bringing the ombudsman position
Sure.
back is fairly interesting because I remember the last ombudsman
Sure.
that worked here, Joe Bizdak.
Yep.
And I think that was in the mid-90s.
It was replaced by, it was someone else that replaced him with us here
It
in
was
2000. Yes, right at the end of,
Yeah, it's been a while.
Hiddleston.
So it's to bring that back, add a slightly different focus on it. I think that's what we need in order to provide a more modern workforce here.
What sort of suggestions or input are you giving city council as they begin work on this budget? I haven't looked and saw, but they'll be working on this fairly soon.
Absolutely. So we're happy to provide any additional information on the budget. Typically, the budget process, our council will go through it, ask additional questions, want to get additional feedback, additional resolutions. So we'll go through that. Nothing this year besides additional positions. It should be super controversial, but this year, unlike many years, there is additional funding to fund capital projects. So in order to allow council a full view of what those projects are, our budget includes all capital projects from departments, whether funded or not, and council is able to go through those and make decisions on what projects will receive funding this year.
Can you and Ryan, explain how much more spending there is in this budget compared to the current year or, last normal year?
Sure. Right?
Yeah, I mean, the total expenditures are up $3.3 million as compared to what we budgeted in 2021.
Thank you.
Eddie, you mentioned there's 41 capital projects budgeted, a list of every single capital project that was requested. Do you know the total number of capital projects requested throughout the
It's a great question. It's in the back of the budget book. There's a lot. What's the total
About
amount?
$20 million.
So
all
there's,
the requests?
yes, so if you add up all the requests, it's $20 million. Of that 20 million, about 3 million has been budgeted for under rescue plan funds.
Thank
And I believe we budgeted some under the city budget as well. Is that right?
That's correct.
I encourage you to look in the back, Dennis, if you want to count all of them. You're welcome to. It's not fun. It's not pretty, but you're up late at night.
3 million, 20 million comparison.
Any other questions?
Some of the capital improvement I saw included fire facilities. Is there anything specific that you guys are gonna be doing?
Yes, so in the presentation, we did talk about, in particular, the truck room renovations for some of the stations, the inclusion of backup generators, new overhead doors, citywide Knox box system, and some other structural items that are necessary for the fire department.
And will that, I imagine, assist the firefighters, in responding to emergencies quicker? We know how long these facilities, I know I've talked to the chief before about the fact that some of the houses don't have internet, for example. They're older, they need to be renovated.
Yeah, so renovations are key. A lot of the fire stations are typically maintained by our firefighters themselves. So things that need larger structural changes, that's the opportunity for the city to fund those. You're right in terms of other things that are needed. All of the fire stations will be getting internet and computers this year to accompany and to complement the new fire software system. Those things are already in the works, but all the fire houses and stations will receive some type of upgrade. Any other questions? We appreciate you guys being here today. Again, for the members of the public, we will put all of this online, and we look forward to going through the budget process as we head into 2022. Thank you, everyone.